While millions of people were out of power in Texas, man of the people, Ted Cruz, decided to go on vacation to Cancun. When asked why he did that shit, he said this.
So the question from the video on the cell phone was whether the decision to go was tone deaf. Look, it was obviously a mistake, and in hindsight, I wouldn't have done it. I was trying to be a dad, and all of us have made decisions. When you've got two girls who've been cold for two days and haven't had heater power, and they're saying, hey, look, we don't have school, why don't we go, let's get out of here. I think there are a lot of parents that'd be like, all right, if I can do this, great. That's what I wanted to do. Well, what I would say is I was taking care of my family the same way Texans all across the state were taking care of my family. And it certainly was not my intention for that to be understood as critics have tried to paint it as somehow diminishing the suffering and hardship other Texans had experienced.
Here's the thing. It didn't really matter where Ted Cruz was when all the power went out. There's not a whole lot he could have done, as he reminded us when it came to COVID relief.
Okay. How do you feel about another stimulus or rescue package? I know it's being talked about, but some Republicans want a pause. No more of this spending. Where do you stand on that, Senator?
We have spent more than enough money. We cannot spend our way out of this. We've spent now nearly $3 trillion.
That's right. The richest country in the world is actually all out of money. So even if we wanted to help all the victims of this Texas power outage, we couldn't. We don't have any more money in the bank.
Most of the Texas congressional delegation voted against the final bill because the final bill got loaded up. It was a $50 billion bill, 70% of which was not emergency aid. Only 30% of that bill was emergency aid.
Here's the reality. Texas is better off with Ted Cruz in Cancun because he doesn't want to help anyone. So after he got caught, Ted Cruz came back and decided that he needed to apologize, which was completely unnecessary because, like I said, we're better off with him gone. But what did Ted Cruz have to say for himself?
Vulnerable. The grid is something that is designed, it is maintained, it is operated, it is regulated at the state level. So that is not a federal government operation.
Exactly. Ever the more reason for him to stay in Cancun. Now, when asked if the CEO of the power company ERCOT should be fired or resign, Ted Cruz said this.
Have a serious and careful examination of that based on the facts.
Should those officials be fired?
Well, it depends what decisions was made. There needs to be a serious examination of what factors led to the grid not being able to sustain the needs and failing massively. And that's something that I don't want to jump the gun and make assumptions about those.
And Ted Cruz is not a man who is known for jumping to conclusions with little evidence. Just for fun, though, we can play around a little bit with what we do know. Both natural gas and wind turbines are functioning completely fine in climates much colder than Texas. Millions of Texans are without power because their wind turbines and natural gas plants froze over. In 2011, a similar situation happened. An investigation was done, and it concluded that in order for these power grids to be upheld in colder conditions, certain steps needed to be taken. ERCOT did not perform these specific steps. Ted Cruz just wants the issue to get lost in committee until everyone forgets about it. We don't need a committee to investigate the specific cause of the power outage down to the gnat's ass, only for them to tell the companies again that they need to winterize their plants. They did this already, but Ted Cruz is never going to argue for government regulation even when it makes sense. He wants to push the condemnation of ERCOT down the road until everyone forgets about it and he doesn't have to condemn anybody at all.
But ERCOT has produced real success in having low-cost energy here in the state of Texas, and most days out of the year, Texans are greater to have lower electricity bills than many other parts of the country. But at the same time, I think a lot of Texans are asking, well, why wasn't it there when we needed it?
And I'm sure that's some consolation to the people freezing in Texas without power and water, that they save some money all the other days of the year. Listen to the CEO of ERCOT answer this particular question.
Okay. Next question from ABC 13 in Houston. The decision Monday at 1 a.m. may have been the right one, but what about decisions that should have been made months or years earlier? Why hasn't ERCOT mandated more winterization that would have prevented this?
Yeah, so, I guess the role of ERCOT is not necessarily to mandate those kind of things. There was some discussion about that back when, and there's been discussion since then because other regions of the country have had a similar issue, and the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, the standard-setting body for the electric utility industry that is regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, is looking at winterization standards. They've been looking at them. There's drafts out there right now. They incorporate in many of the things that are incorporated into the best practices generators are already doing. But there is that standard that's under consideration right now. It's just not mandatory yet.
Yeah, it would take the acts of regulatory agencies like the NERC, as Dan's saying, to implement enforceable standards. So that's where particularly that.
They already knew the steps they had to take to prevent this from happening. The issue was studied back in 2011, but they were willing to play the odds with people's lives because they don't care. It's also not their role to care. It's the government's role to make sure that ERCOT is doing the best for their people. It is not their responsibility to make sure that they cultivate an environment so ERCOT can make as much money as possible. Ted Cruz has droned on for so long about the dangers of regulation, he can't admit, even in this obvious instance, that regulation would have saved people's lives. Instead, he's giving us a risk-benefit analysis while acting like it was a worthy bet to take. And while there's no guarantee that regulation alone would have forced ERCOT to actually winterize their power plants, regulation would have ensured that we could hold them accountable. If we can hold them accountable, there's a much greater chance that they would have spent the money to give the people of Texas the best possible chance to have power during the coldest time of the year. So I don't need Ted Cruz to apologize or resign. I would actually prefer not to listen to it. I want us to remember that the next time Ted Cruz or someone like Ted Cruz tries to demonize government regulation because it is in and of itself evil, we need to hold them to a higher standard. What regulation are you against and why? We don't have the money, and regulation is tyranny are not good answers. I want him and people like him to stand aside and stop impeding those people that actually want to help. And as Texans try and pick up the pieces of the disaster, I want to ask Ted Cruz one favor. Go back to Cancun, please.
Our priority should be fixing this problem and making sure it doesn't happen again.